All right, it is Wednesday. It is 4:30 p.m. Central Time, and we have a pretty okay day outside so far, at least. So, ain't complaining. Hey there, Andrew. How are you?
Oh, I'm not too bad. I'm actually just coming back from, well, I've pretty much been gone since last office hours, coming back from 110 degrees every day in Las Vegas. So, coming back from that to the humidity that we've got here, and I heard that there were quite a few nasty storms that rolled through while I was out.
You missed some rain and wind and thunder, yes, even a
The,
tornado here and there. So,
oh, geez. The thunder I heard a lot about, that it was excessively loud.
yep.
But other than that, yes, you're right. So I can imagine why you are excited about a pretty okay weather day today. Uneventful, I think, is what we're looking for.
Very much so. But on the opposite side of things, we are looking for events, things that happened the last week or so. So I know you had a few things on your mind.
Of course, there's never a dull week in this part of the industry. That's for sure. So the first thing that I have up here are some new Granular RBAC permissions that came out for endpoint security, the endpoint security portion of Intune. We've had a couple of people ask about this in the past, and so I was excited to see this. Typically, in the past, you could just, there was a single role, I believe it was this endpoint security manager role here, that was pretty broad. If you had this role assigned to you in Intune, you could pretty much see everything related to endpoint security. Now, with these new permissions, you can actually specify specific permissions within these three areas: endpoint detection and response, app control for business, and attack surface reduction. So always happy to see some additional controls over what we can and can't add into various custom roles. So this was exciting to see that. Also came across a blog post from our friend Gary Block. So I'm typically working with Dell machines during the course of most of my career, but I know there are plenty of people out there working with HP machines, and Gary is primarily, not surprisingly, blogging about HP. So he wrote a blog post here about moving from the old HP BIOS configuration utility to managing HP BIOS with PowerShell. So I wanted to make sure that we got Gary's blog post out there for any of you using the old platform. It sounds like there are some additional newer, more supported options that you might want to consider looking into. And Gary does a great job here in this blog post spelling those things out. Last but not least, another important thing that I came across here was this tweet that there's a change in behavior of the Windows Update for Business deadline calculations starting in Windows 11 22H2. So just important to reiterate, I think, that the deadline calculation now in 22H2 and later for the quality and feature updates is based off the time the client's update scan initially discovers the update. Previously, it was, as noted here in the documentation, based off the release date or when the update is offered. So now that deadline calculation is happening when the device discovers it for the first time. And then the grace period countdown will continue to start from the time of pending restart. So important, a little bit of nuance there, but an important distinction nonetheless, as we all try to make sure we understand when some of these timings for Windows updates are going to happen. So those were the things I came across. Now, another article that I came across that I know you have talked about a couple of times, Johan, because you knew it was coming out. I have not had the opportunity to digest it yet, but Maurice Staley over at MS Endpoint Manager, wrote a nice long blog post about delivery optimization, troubleshooting, and reporting. And I know that you've mentioned quite a few times recently that delivery optimization as of late has had some challenges. So I didn't know if you wanted to speak to this at all.
Yes, I do. Let's see here. I can bring over the screen. Here. But that's not it. That's PowerShell. Come back to that later. So there have been two posts lately around delivery optimization. I'll come back to Maurice's post in just a bit. But it started with our own Phil Wilcock posting in early June. I believe we shared this link in one of the early office hours, but I wanted to bring it up here because this one talks a little bit about what content that is actually peerable or not peerable, just to bring some context into Maurice's blog post here in a little bit. But long story short, over the years, it's become worse. And there is more content out there that simply cannot be peered. The biggest offender right now is Teams. But as of this week or late last week, we also learned that new Win32 apps in Intune simply will not peer. This apparently was a known issue. It was a service update Microsoft did. They know about it. I have no ETA whether there is a fix. But long story short, if you create a new Win32 app today, it won't peer. Whereas if you download an old Win32 app that you uploaded like in March, it will happily peer. So hopefully that will get fixed more quickly or quickly. Now, going back to Maurice's post here, which a fantastic blog post, by the way, very, very detailed. They've been working on this. I've been getting hints about this post for months in Twitter. Like, all right, we're releasing it. And they finally did. But long story short, this post also emphasizes on the fact that there are content that is not peerable. But Maurice also put together updated inventory scripts that will log data up to log analytics with this information. And spends a little bit talking about what's going on behind the scenes in these scenarios, pointing out some troubleshooting scripts, and also, let's see, somewhere here. That's the script. But then also provide the queries that you can add in log analytics to get more details on how you're doing. And this graph, of course, doesn't look very promising at all. And then also some nice new updates to their, this is a long blog post. Here, some additional graphs and some additional or an updated reworked workbook that you can add to your Intune tenant. So beautiful, beautiful information, allowing you to get more insight to what's going on. In parallel to this, I was having a discussion with Bruce Sa on Twitter, who has the opportunity to also throw Zscaler into the mix. That one of his customers was using for as a VPN client, more or less. And that one turned out also to cause some grief with the default settings. He had to do some configurations there to make sure content was peering, because his peering was like 0%. And it went up to 90% after doing some changes. So, yeah, anyhow, long story short, we will be sharing these links, of course, but this was a big learning for the past few weeks here.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah, indeed. Other things I've been working on lately has been testing out new 24H2 boot images. And for those of you that don't know, the minute you add in a boot image in ConfigMgr that doesn't match the ADK version that you have installed, guess what? You cannot do customizations to it through the GUI anymore. At least some customizations you cannot do in the GUI anymore. So if I have an older ADK version like this one here, but smack in a new boot image with the newer version, well, I'm missing a few of the tabs. that you have available, and this is what it normally would look like. But luckily, with a healthy dose of PowerShell, you can do everything that you need to do anyway. So what I was doing here was I have one of my lab servers. This one is running 80K for Windows 11 22H2. So this version here, that's the 22H2 version. But as you can see, I have added in a boot image that has a much higher version of the 80K, so 26100. And in order to work with that one, I had to borrowed a little bit of lines from Mike Terrell. Has been writing a lot of scripts creating boot images lately, but long story short, I'm specifying where I have my boot image, and I'm mounting it, and I'm adding in all the components that I want to have in it, a few, as you do. And then in the very end of it, do a component cleanup, dismount the image, and then tell in ConfigMgr to customize it. So in this case, I simply wanted to add in F8 support for troubleshooting, and I would add in a custom background image. So I had to do that through WMI. But that allows you to side-by-side test different versions of the boot images. And Alex over on Twitter was complaining earlier this week about, all right, drivers seems to be a little bit more picky in 24H2 compared to the early versions. Still early testing of that one, but that's something to look out for and to verify. So what I do recommend, don't jump to this version right away for your entire production fleet. Go ahead and add in, like I did here, a test image or two. Make a few copies of your sequences, configure them to use this one, and start to try it out. Figure out that all the drivers that you need to have working are working and everything else. So that was what I was spending some time on. Some other things that I'll be hopefully finishing up tonight if all goes well. Been working on a video for setting up the REST PS web service, which is a PowerShell-driven web service. Basically, from a client side, you can very simply ask a server-side component to do something. Ask a database for something, ask Active Directory for something, ask ConfigMgr for something, MDT for something, or why not one of the many cloud services available, without having to have all that authentication running on the client itself, but rather tell the client to, you know what, go hand it over to someone else. That someone else does the job, and that is indeed the REST PS service. So, yeah, if all goes well, it will be published this evening.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. I've heard you talk about it quite a bit over the years, so excited to see what you've got there.
Yeah. Gary was chiming in here in the chat. I just noticed, and hi, Gary. First of all, he feels sorry for you having to work with Dell machines. Funny. But also that he also has started to see some odd things in 24H2 WinPE. In this case, he mentioned the screen refresh issue. Hard to explain. You should record and post, he says. So, yes, Gary, you should.
Exactly. I agree.
Looking forward to the video.
Indeed.
All right. What else is up?
All right. Looks like we've got a couple of questions that have come in. One is from Benny over on YouTube. On the ESP page, we can see a window behind the ESP screen. You could see it with Alt-Tab, but there would be no way to bring it to the front. Are there any scripts that can help with this?
Mike Niehaus did some blogging lately on customizing that Autopilot experience. And it was more like an update to an earlier blog that he had done. Maybe was it last year or something like that. I know we covered a video about it earlier because Mr. Rubik's did a video on it. See if I can find it.
I'm trying to take a look over here on my other screen as well.
You found it?
No, I'm trying to.
All right, I found something.
Nice.
This should be it. So there was a large post that he did about Autopilot branding. And that one has a ton of customizations related to the Autopilot experience. So maybe look into that one. Most of these probably not supported. I don't think anyone is, but still, a lot of customization options there.
Yep. All right. So Matt's joining us this afternoon over on YouTube. Hi, Matt. And he had a question here. It's a couple of messages long. If you move a workload to Intune only, does that affect servers? What about devices that have a bad config client and are not communicating with Intune because they are still on the old policy? Or do I have to delete the device from SCCM? So the first question, if we move a workload to Intune only, does that affect servers? No, because Intune cannot manage servers. If I understand that question correctly.
Yeah, exactly that. You cannot enroll servers into Intune, that they will not become a managed object.
Yep.
You can see them there, but it's not a managed entity by Intune.
Exactly. So as far as the devices that have a bad client, ConfigMgr Client, and are not communicating with Intune because they're still in the old policy, and there's a follow-up here with a Windows Update registry key. My thought is that, Matt, you're probably troubleshooting the Windows Update workload moving over. That's something that Johan and I have seen many times, where you are moving over the Windows Update workload and you do have issues with the registry keys not applying properly. There are a couple of blog posts that we typically share on this. The first one, if you'd like to move over to my screen, Johan, thank you. Let's see, Windows Update for Business. So the first one is kind of a just quick, simple blog post that I wrote a couple of years back now that will basically has a CM pivot query, which was recently fixed, by the way. Somebody commented a week or so ago that this query was not working properly. So if you've picked up this query in the past, this is fixed. Anyways, the CM pivot query will check for the Windows Update registry keys that have the incorrect value and return the devices with those keys that do have the incorrect value, and then a quick PowerShell script here to set that value back to 0. Now, sometimes this will just flat out fix it, and you won't have to do anything else after the fact. Other times, you may have to do some more investigation as to what the root cause is that could set these back to the incorrect value. So if you have a group policy, for example, that's disabling Windows Update or changing any of these registry keys here, you may need to go find that group policy and change it. The other post that we often share is this one right here. That Ben Whitmore put together at the beginning of this year. So this is called SCCM Co-Management, Dual Scan, and Scan Source Demystified. This is a very serious deep dive into this exact scenario. And for a lot of us, I think required reading, because if you are going to move this workload from ConfigMgr to Intune, in our experience, it's almost inevitable that you will have some devices that have issues. So these two things I would take a look at to see if they can fix your issues, Matt. And I will make sure that these get posted again today.
I'd like to add to that even though I haven't seen a bad ConfigMgr Client causing any Intune management issues, I can clearly see that co-management, that state can get upset if a ConfigMgr Client is just broken or misbehaving. I just haven't seen it, but it doesn't sound too far-fetched to be happening.
Absolutely. Great addition to that. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions out there? Still have a 37 minutes to go.
That's quite a bit of time.
Lots of questions can be answered,
That's right.
or at least talked about in the event we don't have an answer, but we'll try our best.
That's right. Sometimes talking about it is enough to get the gears turning to figure it out.
That is true. That is true.
All right. Matt's got another question here. I want to move the device from AD to Entra. The two ways are hybrid or Entra only. Hybrid will use group policy and Entra Connect. What about Entra only? How do I do it? Read somewhere that the user may lose their profile when moving from AD to Entra. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you're leaving legacy Active Directory completely, you remit your device to get into that state. And that means that anything that was on that device, including the profile, is gone.
And this question comes up for both of us, I would say fairly commonly. And we have seen some folks that have tried to migrate, but the only supported way, the only way that you can guarantee that it works correctly is reimaging. Johan and I even heard a talk with Microsoft at MMS where they had spent about a year trying to figure out a scenario to where you could migrate, and eventually gave up on it because it's so hard. So that's pretty much what we're always recommending. Don't listen to, I shouldn't say don't listen to, reimage your device. Reimage your device if you want to go to native Entra join.
Yeah, simple as that. Might not be a fun, but imaging is fun, but it's a bit of work.
Yes. All right. There's a follow-up question from Matt here for hybrid with GPO and Entra Connect. Anything else? No, I mean, in my experience, for most of the hybrid devices I'm working with, Entra Connect is enough because those devices are born on-prem, have line of sight to the domain controllers, and then Entra Connect, as the device object gets created, will just sync that device object up to Entra. And from there, that's pretty much it. And anything else you can think of that I'm missing, Johan?
No, but Mike and Niehaus just joined, and I mentioned a good point here that is for the hybrid scenarios, you do not lose any settings there because the device is still AD joined. It's only when you want to leave AD behind and you go Entra ID only, then your profile is lost.
Yep.
So yeah, thanks there, Michael. Appreciate it. I'm glad to have you here.
Absolutely.
All right.
So we have another question here on YouTube. Any experience with BitLocker data recovery agent? Are people doing that these days? Any best practices for creating, managing, or deploying the certificate?
Oh no, I have not. I have not played around with that at all.
I also have not. Just a follow-up comment there as well. Seems interesting as a backup if a recovery key is missing for a device. I guess another question might be methods to audit or ensure all devices have a recovery key in Entra.
I mean, there is a post from the Forces folks on the topic that pretty much outlines all the different scenarios where you can use recovery agents to unlock BitLocker, but this is not something I have played around with, but it would be a good read. Go through this. So maybe that.
All right. Another question here from Matt. What ports do we need to open on the firewall, inbound and outbound, between SCCM and DP to communicate with each other?
So many.
Yes.
The documentation is not too terrible. I've been working with migrating 2012 R2 install ConfigMgr site server over to a 22 server install this week, and we learned the hard way that the network folks didn't quite open up everything they told us that they have opened up. So trust but verify, I guess it's the. But if you search for distribution point here, for example, you will see each type of workload and what it needs to have open for that workload. So in terms of, for example, the site server, which should be, so here is the communication between the management point and the distribution point. There is another one for site server itself to the distribution point. And also you want to make sure that stuff like WMI is actually accessible. Because the site server wants to query the remote distribution point through WMI, so you can open up, tools like the good old. See what I have here. These should be up and running. So web and test, a tool that's been around for 2 decades now. And you can try to connect to a remote server. So if it's a DP, you can try to connect to that server and see that you actually can do a connection, or even you can connect directly to the SCCM DP namespace if you happen to have a DP role on it already. And usually if you can do this, all right, and then firewall ports are open and things are good. What I have seen is organizations that are using clients, Windows 10, Windows 11 devices as distribution points, is that you also need to allow those executables on the client to be allowed in the firewall, not just open up the ports. So, well, yeah. Long answer, short question, I believe. But it's fairly well documented.
Yeah.
You just need to verify it. So good old testnet connection and these ports, and it should be good.
That's right. All right, perfect. Thank you, sir.
And of course, DNS.
Of course.
DNS, yeah.
Always. It's related to everything.
Yeah.
So Kurt's got a question here for us. When imaging from ConfigMgr and doing a hybrid join with group policies, it takes 3 reboots and a login. Seems just a little bit too long. Would it be easy to optimize this? And a follow-up question here from Kurt. Could cloud attach Intune enrollment work better, faster, more towards zero touch with less reboots?
Well, to start with the first one, imaging from ConfigMgr, I was actually following a thread on Twitter earlier today that I was tagged in, but I didn't have a chance to reply because Mr. Niehaus beat me to it. And that was basically, all right, what about group policy processing during imaging? Well, it turns out that the sequence itself, after the reboot from the WinPE phase, is started by the setup complete CMD process that setup has built into it. And that one is designed to not allow group policy processing until it's done. So it's basically not until the sequence is done until group policy processing kicks in. So what we see customers are doing are things like, if you go to your sequence, let's see what I might have that one, probably here. Let me take a quick look. Maybe this one. Nope. Yeah, this one. So you set a variable at some point in the end of the sequence to force a reboot, because obviously that will force a group policy update when you reboot. I've also seen some folks throwing in a GP update / force here and good lord, command to do a shutdown after the fact. I also see folks in the end of the sequence, preferably the happy part, but where they add in a scheduled task. They create a scheduled task that will reboot the device in 3 minutes, because the SMSTS post action variable will do a reboot once, but then also that registry or that scheduled task counter start to kick in, and the machine will do another reboot. And there are policies that requires multiple reboots. I worked with a conference a few years back. They had an auto login process. Well, that policy at that time required double reboots. There are other policies like credential guard back in the days, Windows 10 days, that also required 2 reboots from being enabled. So shouldn't be that add too many minutes to your deployment, but yeah, there are definitely scenarios where you will have to do multiple reboots to get all policies applied when doing config manager imaging.
All right. So we had a few comments and questions come in over the last couple of minutes. I'm just trying to keep up with them here. Fantastic stuff, by the way. Russell had a comment about BitLocker and hybrid devices. We found that sometimes the recovery keys were registered in AD, other times they were registered in Entra. Absolutely. I was trying to look to see if I could find any recent reports or anything, but just one thought that I had was, of course, you could report on missing keys with PowerShell. You can get that information from MS Graph if you are going from the Entra side, and of course you can also grab it through standard PowerShell commandlets on the legacy or standard Active Directory as well. So, and come across any shiny reports right out of the box, but I think a little bit of scripting can go a long way there. Matt asked a question. The dev tenant has an E5 license, but the Defender for Endpoint is not there. Can you explain it to me? It shows I have to buy one. No, I don't think we can. It's just not there. There are a couple of E5 services that are typically in a normal E5 suite. Defender for Endpoint is one of the ones that's missing from the dev tenant E5 license, as well as Teams Voice and maybe one or two others. There's no Windows license in there as well. So for my dev tenant, I've had to do exactly that. Just go and purchase a couple of additional licenses to get those services to light up. Great question, though. Unfortunately, since we're not Microsoft handing them out, though, I don't have a better answer than that. So some good conversation here in the chat. I believe initially based off of Jamie's comment here. So Jamie asked over on YouTube, have you extracted components from OS and from the OS and injected them into WinPE? HTA runs from ARM 64 OS, but not in PE. Was thinking I could copy components and registry from live OS and inject the same components into Windows PE. So there are a couple of comments here from Michael Niehaus. Looks like Michael, not only is Michael joining us, Bruce is joining us today too. So Michael mentioned IE11 never supported ARM 64, and since that's what HTA uses, it was never in the Windows PE for ARM 64. In theory, you could add the 64-bit emulation component into Windows PE and then add the x64 HTA support. But HTA will go away at some point, so it's best not to depend on it. You concur?
Yeah. Good luck. Yes.
All right. Matt's asking if you have deployed the SCCM client via Intune as an app. Have you noticed an issue with making it installed?
Not in recent years, but there was a time where the Autopilot process was a bit buggy because it was calling the MSI instead of the executable. So we created a Win32 app to deploy it back then. But for the past 2 years, Autopilot has already made action, or a year and a half maybe, to install the agent directly from the Cloud Management Gateway. So I would recommend using that one instead. Technically, there is nothing that prevents you from installing a client as a Win32 app. You just need to have all the content available in it and make sure to throw in the /source switch when you install the ConfigMgr Client agent in your command line. So that is definitely doable.
Yep, and Michael and Bruce pretty much agreeing with exactly what you've just said here in the chat. So, and I would agree as well.
So we have a full quorum. Fantastic. Yeah.
I think so, yes. All right. Diego is asking, have you seen any issues with Autopilot reset or something similar, even when devices are compliant in Intune?
I mean, it's not a scenario I use much, Autopilot reset. I think it's a little bit too lightweight. But so the answer is no. I haven't seen any issues with it. I just don't think it does good enough reset. The best reset is F12, by the way. It's not technically a reset because it definitely will not bring it back into a nice managed state, but it will give you a clean device.
That's right. Not an autopilot reset, but it's a reset of sorts.
Falls under that category, yes.
Yep. And Mr. Niehaus here agreeing with you as well.
Not a fan of autopilot reset. Usually I recommend a normal full reset or just reimage, which is faster. Nice to have friends in the audience.
That's right. So Jamie just had a follow-up comment here from the ARM 64 Windows PE conversation. The 64 components don't inject into, the AMD 64 components don't inject into ARM WinPE. Was thinking of expanding the cab and injecting into SXS package folder.
It's a good attempt as any. Just smack in the files and hope for the best. A bunch of registry keys probably need to be added as well. Can be done offline. Might even be able to treat it as a driver. That was what we did with plugins back in the days. I wrote a AdZip plugin that actually still works in newer WinPE, but it basically treats a packet as a driver and injects it as a driver. And ARM supports drivers. I'm not sure how happy it would be to consider a 64-bit content as an ARM driver, but heck, why not try? What can
That's right.
possibly go wrong?
We're not afraid of unsupported around here.
Well, if you're already discussing extracting component from an x64 optional component into the side-by-side store in WinPE and mounting it offline and adding it in, I think we're beyond unsupported already at that point.
Well, I guess to the point, I believe beyond unsupported or some variation of that is in at least one or two of your blog post titles over the years.
That may have happened.
But hey, that doesn't mean it doesn't work.
I think the first time ever was for WinPE 2. I somehow squeezed in IPsec into it. When IPsec still was a thing. But yeah.
That's awesome.
Fun stuff.
Oh, yes.
Oh, running .NET as a container in WinPE was fun also.
Oh, I can imagine.
And Microsoft eventually added in support for WinPE, or sorry, for .NET to WinPE, but the early versions did not have it.
Sometimes I'm sad that I missed out on all the excitement.
We should cry too much about that. That was an ugly hack. Oh, I found the post. I have to share it. This is good
Yes.
memories. Don't do this ever. This is from back in 2008. So good 17 years ago, 16. How to add .NET Framework into WinPE by basically using at the time it was a virtualization technology called ThinApp that VMware had, that basically allowed you to run .NET in a bubble in WinPE. So fun stuff.
Heck yeah.
I had good hopes for Deploy Vista back in the days. Didn't turn out too well, as you guys know. So I abandoned this blog post. First, I actually turned it down or turned it off, and I got hammered with emails from people saying, "No, you cannot turn it off. I was using these articles." Like, all right, fine, I will bring it up as an archive then. So I did. So it still exists as an archive. It's just that I doesn't allow comments or anything. But yeah, it's here. There are some cool things happened over the years. I think one of my favorites was the F11 one. It's no longer supported, but back in the days, you can trick a Pixie server to show a list by pressing F11 to list all the Pixie servers that was on that subnet.
That's cool.
So fun stuff. Total sidebar.
I also have some nostalgia for like the very first post on the archive has screenshots that have Windows Arrow in it, and I personally liked that UI quite a bit.
Which one?
There you go, right there. Just that old Arrow look.
Yeah. It was groundbreaking at the time.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe just because that's when I was, that was around the time that I was really starting to do some real enterprise IT work and moving off of XP to that. It was like almost like a new world.
It was. I mean, a lot of stuff what we have today is, lo and behold, it's thanks to Windows Vista.
Yep.
All right. Total sidebar there for a second.
Down
Trip
memory
down
lane.
memory lanes. Yeah. Any other questions out there? I hope we didn't miss any.
Let me double check. I don't see any at the moment. But if you want to give a second set of eyes there too.
No, I do not see anything. No, I believe that is all. Give it 7 more seconds. Isn't that the usual meeting timeout?
That's right.
Worst case, we can always catch up next week if there are late follow-ups coming in. But everyone chiming in today, thank you so much. Everyone asking questions, also thank you so much. And Andrew, thank you for being back for your vacation, joining us here on the office hours. So thank you, everyone.
Of course, it's great to be back. Thank you, Johan, and thanks everyone for joining this week. Have a great one.